Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another edition of our webinar series, Inside Immigration. We are joined by our panelists, Alannah, Glintz, and Michael Hughes, who will provide us with the latest developments in Canadian immigration. Please feel free to ask any questions via the questions icon at the top of your screen, and we will do our best to address them at the end. If the panelists do not get to your question, you can contact them through the information provided on the screen. And with that being said, I'll hand things over to Alannah and Michael.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Just as an introduction, my name's Alannah. I'm one of the senior associates here at Green and Spiegel.
Hi, everybody. My name's Michael. I'm one of the associates here at Green and Spiegel.
And we'll dive into our topic. So we have a couple things to go over today, mostly updates that have occurred since our previous webinar. And then, of course, if you have any questions, please add them to the Q&A box or the chat box, and we'll try to get to those best we can. So we wanted to start off with the update with respect to Mexican nationals and requirements for entry. So on February 29th, 2024, this year, IRCC announced that effective on the same day, all Mexican citizens will need to meet new requirements in order to travel to Canada. So previously, Mexican nationals would only require an electronic travel authorization to fly into or transit through Canada. And were eligible to apply for, visitor status or work permits, all at the port of entry. But with these new rules, that's changed. So now most Mexican nationals will need to apply for entry to Canada in advance of their travel. So through usually online through their respective consulate, depending on their country of residence. So this is a major change. So Mexican citizens are now only eligible to apply for an electronic travel authorization if they meet the following eligibility criteria. So one, they hold a Mexican passport and they're planning to fly or transit through a Canadian airport. Two, they're coming for a short visit, meaning normally up to 6 months, which is kind of our standard, visitor status period. And then third, they have to meet this criteria, which is having held a Canadian visitor visa in the last 10 years or currently hold a valid U.S. non-immigrant visa. So if the Mexican national does not meet all these requirements, they are not eligible to apply for an electronic travel authorization, and they require a visa to come to Canada, for which they would apply online prior to travel, and they'd have to get the visa approved, stamped in their passport before they're able to come to Canada. So what we've seen in practice is that most ETAs that were already held by Mexican nationals have been canceled. So almost across the board, that's what we've seen in practice. So, even individuals who are here in Canada with, say, a valid work permit with an ETA have been canceled. Now, individuals that currently have valid work permits or valid study permits, there are instructions on getting those ETAs, those electronic travel authorizations, reinstated, because that was actually incorrect that they were canceled. So folks that already have valid work permits or study permits would still be able to use their ETA without having to apply for a new one, typically. So there are specific instructions that immigration has provided to get those ETAs reinstated if they were incorrectly canceled. And we've seen very quick response times on that. Usually within about 1 to 2 days, we receive a response from immigration having those reinstated. So if you need help with that, please reach out to us. It's important to understand that ETAs are valid for air travel only. So even if say it's an employee, even if your Mexican national employee is eligible for an ETA, they would still require a visitor visa, so that visa stamped in their passport if they're coming to Canada by air, bus, train, boat. Even if they're on a cruise ship and they don't leave the ship, they need a visa. So that's something to be aware of. And again, if the person is not eligible for an ETA because they don't meet that criteria that I had mentioned, then they would also need a visa. So another important piece to note here is that given that criteria, most Mexican nationals now are applying for their work permits at the consular level online as opposed to at the port of entry. So again, major change for Mexican nationals that we need to be aware of. And, it means that we're having to address the plans for applying, especially for work permits for these individuals, because previously we could have done that at the port of entry. Well, now we're having to do that in advance at the consular level. So something to be aware of. Again, have any questions, please reach out to our office. We also have a blog post on this that lays out that criteria again, so feel free to take a peek at that. But that's the update for Mexican nationals. Moving on to another update, I wanted to speak about the innovation work permit stream. So back in June of 2023, actually, immigration had released a tech talent strategy backgrounder. So Canada was emphasizing that it wanted to embrace itself as an emerging leader in global tech talent recruitment. So as part of this announcement, immigration had indicated the goal of developing an innovation stream work permit, which would be LMI exempt and employer specific, with a duration of up to 5 years, which is excellent. And this would be for workers who are in select in-demand occupations and destined to work for employers who the government has identified as contributing to industrial innovation goals in Canada. So fast forward to March of this year, immigration has actually provided a bit of an update on that with the release of the innovation stream employer-specific work permit. So now it's kind of come to fruition. This work permit is for individuals who have received a job offer in a highly skilled occupation from an employer who is participating in the global hypergrowth project. So it's a select group of employers who would be eligible for this work permit, at least at this time. So the global hypergrowth project is a new service with the goal of assisting companies who are rooted in Canada to upscale. So 8 Canadian organizations have been selected as the first group of participants. And if someone has a job offer from one of these companies, then they might be eligible to apply for this LMA exempt work permit under the innovation stream. So it's just something that people should be aware of. Again, we have a blog post listing all of these 8 companies and organizations. So please refer to that. And if you have a job offer from one of those companies, we'd be happy to help with the work permit. Currently, there are no opportunities for additional organizations to apply to be part of this project, but immigration's website does indicate to check back in the future for further opportunities. So it's possible and perhaps likely that this list would grow moving forward. So it's something we will keep an eye on, and we will also provide an update when we have that additional information. So it's the innovation stream. One other piece before I pass it over to Michael that I wanted to touch on is just a reminder that the temporary policy permitting students to work more than 20 hours per week while on their study permit is actually coming to an end on April 30th of this year. So very soon that temporary policy will end. So this is the policy that allowed students on study permits who would typically be allowed to work up to 20 hours per week to work full-time hours. It's possible that this might be extended. We have not received that confirmation yet. It's also possible that the 20 hours per week might be increased. There's been some indication about that from immigration that we might just see an increase in that standard. Again, no update on that yet. So as of right now, employers and students should be aware that the expectation is that they're going back to 20 hours per week while on a study permit. Unless they're on, a school designated break or summer holidays, that's when you can work full-time hours as long as you meet some other criteria as well. So just wanted to set that reminder. And now I will pass it over to Michael.
All right, thanks, Alannah. So I'm going to talk about some upcoming changes to the temporary foreign worker program. So changes that will impact labor market impact assessment applications, LMIAs, and work permits that are based on positive LMIAs. So starting on May 1st, all LMIAs that are issued are going to be valid for a period of 6 months. So this is a decrease from the current 12-month validity period that LMIAs are being issued for. And what this means is that once an employer obtains a positive LMIA, the foreign worker that they're looking to hire will then have 6 months to use that LMIA, so to apply for a work permit or for permanent residence. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw the validity period of LMIAs increase to 18 months, which was then reduced to 12 months, and we're seeing another further reduction now to 6 months. Prior to COVID, LMIAs were valid for a period of 6 months, so we're seeing now Service Canada returning to that pre-pandemic LMIA validity period. Next upcoming change under the temporary foreign worker program is with respect to the low wage cap that applies to low wage LMIA applications. So under the temporary foreign worker program, Service Canada imposes this cap on the number of employees that an employer can hire under the low wage stream of the temporary foreign worker program. So this affects employees who earn a wage that is lower than the provincial median wage. For example, right now in Ontario, the provincial median wage is $28.39 per hour. So anything less than that hourly wage would qualify for a low wage application. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, employers were subject to a cap of 10% on the proportion of foreign workers that they could hire in low wage positions. During the pandemic, that cap was increased to 20% and to 30% for employers who were hiring in specific industries. So those industries included construction, food manufacturing, furniture manufacturing, hospitals, nursing and residential care facilities, and accommodation and food services industries. That 30% cap for these industries will be reducing to 20% effective May 1st for all industries except construction and healthcare. Last, we have an update with respect to recruitment and the recruitment activities that are generally required by an employer before applying for an LMIA. So employers will need to explore every option before applying for an LMIA. This will now include recruiting asylum seekers with valid work permits in Canada. So traditionally, the exercise that employers have to go through before filing an LMIA application is recruiting online and proving to Service Canada that there are no qualified or available Canadian citizens or permanent residents. So with this update, we're seeing the scope of that, those recruitment activities expanded to include consideration of asylum seekers with open work permits in Canada. So during COVID-19, the pandemic, and the months and years that have now followed, we saw quite a few facilitative measures introduced to expand access to the temporary foreign worker program, but now we're starting to see changes that it's looking like the program is going to become more restrictive. Last thing with respect to the temporary foreign worker program and LMIAs is on April 2nd, the provincial median wages were updated and in most cases increased. So this impacts employers looking to use the temporary foreign worker program as the provincial median wage or higher must be offered to qualify for a high wage LMIA application. If an hourly wage that is less than the provincial median is going to be offered to a foreign worker, that would qualify for a low wage LMIA application, which generally carries additional employer obligations. So important for employers to make sure that they're aware of the updates to those provincial median wages as of April 2nd. Last thing I'm going to talk about is just to give an overview and some updates on the public policies that are currently in place from IRCC, who are in place to assist Israelis, Palestinians, Sudanese, Iranians, and Ukrainian nationals. So IRCC has implemented a number of different policies to assist these foreign nationals, largely in response to conflict and political events that have affected these groups. So first, we have the public policy that is intended to assist Israeli and Palestinian passport holders. So Israelis and Palestinians that are in Canada with a valid temporary resident status, they continue to be able to apply for fee-exempt study or open work permits. And the deadline to apply under this policy is now June 12th, 2024. Similarly, immediate family members of Canadian citizens or permanent residents who left Israel or the Palestinian territories on or after October 7th, 2023, and who are in Canada with valid temporary resident status can also apply for a fee-exempt study or open work permit. Same deadline here, that's June 12th, 2024. And last, we have foreign nationals who are in Gaza who are extended family members of Canadians and permanent residents are able to apply for a temporary resident visa to come to Canada if they will be supported by their Canadian or permanent resident family member for 1 year and otherwise meet admissibility criteria to Canada. Moving on to the public policy in place to assist citizens of Sudan. The temporary measures continue to include the ability for Sudanese foreign nationals in Canada with valid temporary resident status to apply for a study or open work permit. The deadline to do so is October 27th, 2024. And more recently, IRCC announced a family-based permanent residence pathway for people who resided in Sudan when the conflict began on April 15th, 2023, are the extended family member of a Canadian or permanent resident who is willing to support that application. And IRCC is going to accept up to 3,250 of these applications. For citizens of Iran, we've seen an extension of the public policy and facilitative measures in place. So Iranian citizens with valid temporary resident status in Canada continue to be able to apply for fee-exempt extensions of their temporary resident status, including the ability to apply for an open work permit. These measures have been extended until February 28th, 2025. And finally, with respect to Ukrainians, some of the Canada-Ukraine authorization for emergency travel measures have been extended. So the intake of overseas applications under this program did close last year on July 15th, 2023, and approved applicants initially had until March 31st of this year to travel to Canada under these special measures. However, for those who applied before the deadline of July 15th last year and experienced delays with the processing of their application and received a positive decision on or after February 4th of this year, they now have until July 31st, 2024 to arrive in Canada, at which point they can apply inland for a study permit or open work permit free of charge. So as you can see, there's quite a few public policies that IRCC is continuing to use to help facilitate the entry of specific foreign nationals to Canada who are affected by these series of global conflicts. I think that takes us to the end of our updates.
Yeah, just on the note of, I see a question in the Q&A here. On the note of public policies, with respect to the out of status construction worker public policy for those in the Greater Toronto area, that has in fact been extended until July 2nd of 2024. If you have any specific questions with respect to eligibility, just because there are some pretty specific requirements under this temporary policy, I would suggest reaching out to our office and we can discuss that a bit further. I just don't want to miss any of the requirements here. There are quite a few. I think it would extend beyond the time allowed for this webinar. So if you could reach out to us, I think we could discuss that a bit further. Are there any other questions in the meantime? I'm not seeing any more in the Q&A or the chat. We can give a moment if anyone has any questions.
Okay, well, if there are no other questions, I think I'll end the webinar for today then. I'd like to thank everyone for attending today's webinar, and a special thanks to Alannah and Michael for sharing their expert knowledge. If you would like to discuss any of today's topics in more detail, or you have a question that you just thought of now, please reach out to book a consultation, and details can be found on the screen right now. As I mentioned in the chat as well, a recording of this webinar will be available on our website and our YouTube channel. I also encourage all of you to sign up for our e-alerts and to follow us on social media to keep up to date on the latest developments inside Canadian immigration. Thank you all and take care. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.